Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Raising Millionaires podcast. I am your co-host Roger Bryan, and this is
Richard Lorenzen.
Richard. How the heck are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Brian? Roger,
Great,
Brian.
great, Brian, Roger, whatever you want to call
Brian,
me.
Roger.
Today we are going to be talking about the tail end of tariffs. When I say tail end, that almost sounds like we're through them, and we're not. We're just kicking the can down the road, but there's some stuff to talk about there. We're going to talk about some big news with the S&P 500. It's a watershed moment for crypto. We're going to talk tax bills and how that may affect how you're investing for your kids. And then we're going to talk real estate investing a little bit here as we continue to work forward with our fund and look to make our first investment by this summer. So buckle up, grab a pen and paper. You know what I said? Grab a pen and paper to some of my Gen Z employees this week. And like you could see the look in their eyes while we were on our team call, like, what? So maybe I shouldn't be saying that. Just ages me. Richard,
I still use the pad of paper for all my meetings.
I go through a couple of these a year. I can't live without it. I don't know why. All right. First off, Coinbase getting added to the S&P 500. Who
Yep.
would have ever thought a crypto company would end up in like the creme de la creme of stocks? Let's talk about this a little bit because we both were investors on day one.
Yep.
I sold probably at less of a loss than you're in right now, but still hit pretty hard because that thing tanked out of the gate, and you've held on forever. Now, the whole taxable event thing, you still could have exited and put that money into other things. Why did you hold on?
You know what? I think it's just one of those. Well, first of all, I bought in at the IPO. My price, I was just looking at it. The price that I got in at was $371.50. And
Okay.
so for context, where is it trading now? It's at like two something. So
And it's up 22% today, which is why it warrants a talk.
right, it's up 22% today. It's currently trading at 254 and a quarter. And so where I sit now, I'm down about 33%. At the low, I was down probably 90% or more.
I
And
I can remember you and I talking, and I'm like, I think I'm going to buy some really long calls on this. I think it was around like 38 or 39.50, and I'm like, it's going up from here. And man, talk about missing. Should have pulled the trigger on that one.
right, right. And you know what? I think for me, just I kind of still maybe in some ways I would say more of the reason that I held on was just because I'm holding it in a tax deferred account, and so there wasn't like a tax loss to harvest. But there are probably better uses for the money. It wasn't a significant investment. I didn't buy that much of it. And putting my long term hat on, I also probably still in some ways think about Coinbase as not just a crypto, broker dealer, if you will, basically, but longer term, it could become a platform.
Well, the
Uh, you know,
CEO came out and said that they're becoming a platform last week coming into all of this. And it's interesting because as you see all of the mainstay platforms, like I just logged into Charles Schwab right before we were doing this call, look at some things. And while they're all adding in what Coinbase does, Coinbase is also looking to become more like them. So
mm,
there will be a day where Coinbase is a Charles Schwab, is a it's funny. I have all these names in my head, and I'm like, no, they got bought by them. No, they got bought by them. And I'm like, which ones are even ones
yep,
anymore? I feel like even Charles Schwab for me wasn't where I started. It's 4 acquisitions ago. I think I was originally with Scott Trade way back in the
yep,
day with my original account. So
yep.
it, I knew this would always happen. I think my biggest thing is I put my biggest bet in the space on a platform called T0 to do that, and then
hmm
they completely floundered their opportunity. And
hmm
I got to look up. I haven't been in them in like 2 years, but I haven't checked their stuff.
I do they still even? I know that I had an account with them years ago, and I still get some emails about like needing to close my account or transfer over, which it hadn't. There was nothing left in that account, but I get the emails to transfer over, I guess, any balance that could be there. Um, yeah, they went up in smoke, didn't they?
Yeah, they're trading at 250. I think I got in at 633 pre-IPO, and then I exited a bunch in the $6 to $7 range. And then I actually was able to buy in a couple times at $1 and ride it to 5. So even though I probably, when you look at the dollar cost averaging across it, the whole investment realm over 2 years, probably made a little bit of money, but it was a very long tail trade. But I always assumed that they were going to be that. They were going to be the crypto platform to compete with the big boys. And they never marketed.
Yep.
They never spent a penny on marketing. It used to drive me absolutely insane.
But it is something to see Coinbase get added to the S&P.
It is.
I guess it is in some ways. It's the natural next step, considering that the S&P is already dominated by the Mag 7 and AI and different types of emerging technology. Why not have a Coinbase in there?
So, I know this week we're refreshing some of the branding with Block Capital, and every time I do that and I go into my Google Drive and I search for Block Capital, this presentation comes up. I did it at Equity Trust in 2018, where I was training their sales team on how to sell cryptocurrency to institutional investors. And in the presentation, it says the market cap today is 100 billion. Imagine what happens when it gets to 1 trillion. And now we're sitting here at 3 trillion, a 30x from when I did that presentation. And I always look at that, I'm like, man, I was there, right? You always wish you bought more. But it's just interesting to see where this whole thing has come to, how it's come to fruition. And Coinbase and the S&P 500, watershed moment for us.
Yep.
What do you want to talk about next? You want to talk about China tariffs, or you want to talk about Trump in the Middle East?
Well, let's talk about China, because the market. So yesterday, the administration announced that it would be reducing tariffs on China from, I think it was the high water mark was maybe 145%, reducing it down to, what is it now, 30%? Significant
It was a significant drop. I don't know, was it 30% or 50?
It was either 30 or 50, and then China announced that they would also be reducing their tariffs on U.S. Products even further than that. And so yesterday, equity markets rallied on the Nasdaq was up, I think at the high point maybe 4.5%. It was a very good day for equities, and then we're continuing to see some of that today. I think the Nasdaq was up about 1.5% last time I looked at it.
Wasn't Elon in I don't know where are they at? They're not in the UAE today.
They're in Saudi Arabia.
And I think Altman's with them, so I think they're there was what the heck is his name? Oh man, I forgot to look that up before the call. There was someone on CNBC basically all day today. They kept jumping in and out on him. His name is Roger, really smart guy. What the heck is his name? He said something that really caught my attention. And it's because I've seen this so many times in my career, but I didn't associate AI with it. Well, Roger something. His exact words, I may have eluded me, but basically the context of it is that AI, as it's being sold today, will never be what it's saying it's going to be. It's never going to be something that the everyday person or even the everyday business owner uses to dramatically change their life. It's going to make things easier, but it's not an industrial revolution. It's not the internet. And that right now, all of the work that the Trump administration is doing is fundraising. They've never seen a presidency be on the fundraising front. Like, they're going over there. I think they've got like a $600 billion promise from Saudi Arabia. They want to get it to $1 trillion to invest in this. But what it really is it sounds like to me that he's calling it dumb money, right? It's hype money. It's like raising money for a startup that we know is never going to get there, but still they're going out and selling it because people are willing to give it money. And that really caught my attention because I don't know that I perceived or perceive AI as being unable to deliver on the promise. I will admit that a lot of the things that I want to do with it today don't work, right? I can't build the code bases that I want to build. I can't replace staff in the way that everybody says that you can, right? All those courses that you see people selling online, right? They're BS. They can't do what they say that they're doing. And it caught my attention because, we were talking about China. Let me connect those dots. He was saying that China knows this. So China is internally developing the technology on a path where they know the predictable outcome that they're going to do, and they're not involved in these overhyped fundraising things because it's not needed, right? Right now, all of this money that's being invested is not going to have an ROI on it. It's just people chasing their tail, trying to be part of what they think is going to be the next big wave. What do you think when you hear that?
Well, China also took a lot of the air out of the AI trade earlier this year, maybe it was the end of last year, when they rolled out the DeepSeek, kind of the competitive product that China rolled out to ChatGPT. And so one of the things I think about when I hear that is, um, that's, of course, that's the position that I would expect China to take, given that it seems like they built DeepSeek with a fraction of the investment and time that it took, I guess, for ChatGPT to be developed here in the U.S. So I think that they have some sort of, there's an advantage for them to be able to come out and say, well, it doesn't need to cost this much. It doesn't need to, be this effort and resource intensive to develop the technology. But will AI technology ever be as transformative as something like the internet? I think that's the bigger question. You can point to people who said the same thing about the internet
Yep.
5 years ago, right?
Why can't I find that guy's name?
So I don't know. I do think that looking at the near term, the AI trade has become very frothy. That's something I'm comfortable saying. I think that you're seeing valuations that are very frothy, that have just been bought up into oblivion, and we haven't seen a bottom line impact from that investment yet for most of these companies.
Yeah, and I think what caught me on this is there is the comparison of the U.S. to China and their understanding or approach towards it, but then also a lot of self-reflection where like crypto 2017-18 was supposed to be the birth of the blockchain revolution that was going to change how data is stored and how insurance was like how everything in the world was recorded, and it didn't necessarily live up to that fruition, and that there was a lot of investment in startups around those types of ideals that never paid off. And I was involved in a lot of them, so I heard what he was saying, and I'm like, I can relate to that. I don't think that blockchain is a fraction of what AI is going to be. I'm not trying to compare those two,
I
but
agree with
it's a
that.
very similar storyline. I believe
Yeah.
there's 5 major AI companies with Trump in the Middle East, and he came out at this Roger. Oh my God, I'm driving myself nuts not being able to figure out his name. Said that 2 or 3 of them won't exist in 5 years.
You did an interview today.
Yes, he's wasn't
Was
Roger.
it Roger McNamee?
Yes, there you
Elevation
go.
Partners, yeah.
Yeah, like I heard him on my way to work, or on my way to the office. Then I heard him after I dropped Claire off at school. I heard it when I was coming back from getting an oil change. Like he was on all day talking, and he really caught my attention. That's why I wanted to mention it. Thanks for finding his name. Why couldn't I find it on my phone?
I just put in Roger AI CNBC, and it was either
I
going to
didn't
be
have to
you or
figure out.
somebody else coming up. So,
Yeah, he had some interesting things to say, and I think, and I kind of segmented from what we were talking about with China. The big thing to think about with tariffs still, we didn't change anything. We punted for 90 days. The reason that I bring that up is that even with the worldwide 90-day limit coming up, and China 90-day countdown on, there's probably still going to be trading opportunities around specific countries' trade deals or lack thereof as these timelines expire. I have not been the biggest international trader, but there are ETFs that mimic international markets that might be a good look that I'm going to start looking at now to see where they are in relation to trade negotiations based on what is publicly available. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know, what other trade opportunities do you
So,
see in the tariff realm?
so where are we in relation to the initial 90-day pause that was uh, enacted for all the other countries except China following the Liberation Day announcement? Was that the week of? I know it was maybe the last week of April, or um, the week before that.
United States will
Was it the week of the
pause.
14th of April? Maybe.
I'm
I'm,
looking
I'm
at
just curious.
April
Like,
2nd.
say that again.
April 2nd.
It was April 2nd. Okay, so it was further back than I thought it was.
We're
So
almost at the
we're
halfway
about,
point then.
we're about a month and a half into
Oh, I'm
that
sorry.
90 day.
April 2nd, I think, was Liberation Day. April 9th was Pause Day.
Okay. Okay. So we're a little over a month into a 90-day pause on that, much more comprehensive package of tariffs that were imposed on pretty much every country in the world. Um, have we seen any progress besides the UK trade deal? Has there been significant progress on any of those
What,
180?
what's interesting is the answer is supposedly yes, but then they're also not like when I think of a trade deal, you think of like delegates sitting around a table hammering out a document that outlines the do's and don'ts, the numbers and things like that. And the Trump administration is constant. That's not what we're doing this time. We're just going to have agreements. What does that mean?
So the point that I'm getting at though is, um, it seems like we impose tariffs we to send a message, sends shockwaves through the market. We then a couple days later delay those tariffs so that we can shore up damage in the market. And then like a lot of other policies that we saw, especially during the first 4 years of the first Trump term, it seems like they kind of fade away. And so I feel like a 90-day pause, whether it's the China tariffs, the other tariffs, is kind of just a more subtle off ramp for the administration to say that there's not going to be any tariffs at all moving forward at all.
No, no, no. I think we've talked about this before. I don't think the 10% is going away.
The 10%, no, and it's not even at 10% with China right now. It's at 30 or 50, right? I think
Yeah,
that will
you're right.
stay.
You're right. There's a
But
10% across the board for everybody except China, whose minimum is,
I
I think,
I, I
30
agree with you.
now, and
I
then the
think
reciprocals are on top of that.
I think the 10% will stand. I think that the 30 or the 50% with China will stand. But what I'm saying is they phrase it as a pause, but I think the 145% tariff is on China is gone for good. I think it was,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah. I don't
it's a
disagree with
more
that.
politically convenient way for them to get rid of it without having to necessarily lose face. Um, so in terms of like, so your question was like trading on the tariffs. I don't think the tariffs are coming back, whether a trade deal gets reached in 90 days or 60 days or not. Um, I think
Don't
this
you
was an
still
easy way for
think,
them to
though,
fill it.
that there's a Trump tantrum somewhere in there to make an example of someone who's not negotiating? Like, we all think that it's China. Maybe not. Like, really, what does Trump want? He wants a booming economy. He wants interest rates low so everybody can borrow and spend. He wants
Interest rates low, and
inflation down.
he wants to bring manufacturing back.
Does he, though? Because we talked about this the other day. If you're a business, right, and you're getting ready to move manufacturing because you're facing 145% tariff on your goods and now you're facing 30%, do you really need to invest $100 billion in a factory in the United States now? Right?
Hmm.
Well, so much of that is already, right? I understand why, like, the macro business environment is so complicated because all of the planning and plotting that you would have done would have just, the rug would have been pulled out from you already, right?
Hmm.
No one's going to go build multi-billion-dollar factories unless you're getting money from Saudi Arabia to do it. Um, if the numbers keep changing,
Yep.
I'm a small Amazon seller, and there was a little bit of a pause on restocking supply. And you better believe an email went out yesterday checking what prices were on stuff to try to see if I can stock up again. Um, that manufacturing for that stuff was never moving.
So do you think we'll see some kind of a return to a higher tariff on China?
No, but I think 30 to 50% is reasonable. I think that what Trump has done, though, is he has made a point, like he can do this at any time. Because I think the real problem with China is their internal systems for supporting their manufacturers, right? It's not just about the tariff amounts, right? The subsidies that the Chinese government gives the companies can more than cover, and they were getting ready. This might even have been part of the trigger for lowering the tariffs. They were getting ready to pump. I don't want to give a number because I don't know what the real number was, but a ton of money into their manufacturing base to shore up against the tariffs. They're basically saying, hey, go ahead, raise your tariffs to whatever you want. We'll cover it so that their companies don't hurt at all to keep their economy
Right.
going. I don't know that they really had a choice not to do that, but it's like we're playing a game of chicken with the world's two largest economies.
I think the tariffs accomplished some of the political goals that the administration had. You can point to that and say, because it was a very disruptive, bold thing that the administration did. And so, from a political perspective, that was a promise kept, right, from the campaign trail. So you can point to that as a win. But economically, did it actually realign or shift any of like the global economic paradigm? No. And like you pointed out, for companies who were thinking about reinvesting into manufacturing capabilities here in the U.S., when you see the tariffs go up and down like this on a weekly basis, you're probably going to wait before you just go spend $1 billion building plants in North America
Mm-hmm.
when it seems like those tariffs can get repealed at any time. So I feel like this was more of there were political objectives that were met. Did we accomplish anything economically?
No.
Here
I
you go.
mean, in the end, if on the government's P&L, there's now a line item for tariff income, and Trump can try to get that number up. I mean,
Yeah.
100 billion is just laughable. Half a trillion, right? Annualized tariff income. What we're running a $4 trillion deficit over the next 10 years. That becomes a balancing item. You might need to raise taxes here or do other things. I don't know that the GDP is going to rise through all of this, at least in the short term, to offset his tax cuts that he wants to make permanent. But every little, I think one of the biggest problems with government, and I've talked to many people about this, is that you say things like, well, $10 billion doesn't really make a difference in a $1 trillion budget. Well, that's how people go broke, right? If you're running a $10,000 a month deficit in your business, but you're like, oh, that's only $500, it's not going to make a difference, you go broke, right? You gotta take every single last penny that you can get out of it. So the 10% is a line item. At the end of his term, if he can say that now on an annualized basis, he's created this much revenue for the country based on this, it's a win.
Sure.
I was really thinking about it today. It's like most people will agree that Trump's approach to all of this has been less than, well, it's been messy, is the only way to put it. In the history books, though, they're not going to look at what happened in the 90-day windows or the 1-week windows. The book's going to be written about the long-term value that is created or the economic calamities that are created by these decisions, like, was it Smoot, whatever the hell you call it, back in the 20s that they think was a big part of the Great Depression.
Yep. Smooth Holly.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. Like, I don't know, right? I've hated every aspect of this. But if the outcome is good, like,
I think the problem is when you talk about a really big initiative like trying to, for example, if it's bringing manufacturing back to America, like that's considering how many years, decades that the kind of the center of power in manufacturing has shifted, and kind of decentralized globally. It takes more than, honestly, even a 4-year presidential term to do that. And so to really achieve something like that, and there is sacrifice that's required on everybody's part to see it through, because tariffs are expensive, but there are a lot of other aspects of that are expensive too. And there was an article this morning. I don't remember. Maybe it was CNBC. Um, I don't remember where I saw it, but there was somebody who was talking about how, in America, one thing that's changed, if you look at America today versus, let's say maybe during World War II, America has kind of lost its disposition to be able to sacrifice for the long term.
Oh yeah.
We're a nation of immediate gratification now,
There,
and so, to do something big like that, I don't think the country has the political will or patience to stay the course long enough to really affect that kind of a massive shift.
there was and I don't remember where I heard this, but oh no, it was today. And I mean, I hear it all the time. As you get older in your horizon for experience and understanding of what's coming in the future becomes greater, right? You start to see trends, or you start to see things in a much larger scale. So, for example, like I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, right? When I was growing up, everyone's dads worked either in the auto industry or in the steel factory where I grew up. And then by the time I got to high school, so many of my friends' dads lost their jobs while I was in high school and all the steel factories closed.
Mm.
And then as I was graduating, all of the huge Chevy and Ford manufacturing plants closed. In fact, today, where the biggest Ford plant in the area was, it's now completely demolished, and that's where they're building the new Brown Stadium.
Mm.
So, like, I watched all of that manufacturing shift out. I remember when I was in the military, I took a part-time job at night working in a place called Robinson's May selling suits. And one of the women that I worked with, her husband ran an investment fund. This would probably have been like 98, 99. He was over in China opening a chain of gyms. So they
Mm.
were introducing the concept of the gym to the Chinese economy. And because of the time difference, the only time he could call when she was when she was at work. So I would hear them arguing about money because he was just trying to make it work. I don't think that he was like some multi-billion-dollar fund manager. Of course, she was selling suits at Robinson's May, so probably not. But I've always wondered what happened there, because that was like my first introduction to, right? There are people that have uprooted their lives that go to China to introduce them to Americanized ideologies and capitalism, right?
Yep.
And try to make it big. For all I know, they own the largest chain of gyms in China. For all I know is they got shut down a year later, and the Chinese government's like, no, we're going to do it. But if you look at that, like growing up in a manufacturing hub, watching it all be decimated, right? The
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood that I grew up in, if you go back to it today, it's unrecognizable, right?
Mm.
The shopping centers are all closed and boarded up. The houses look terrible. Of course, now the Brown Stadium's going in there, and the houses have doubled in value since that announcement, which just blows my mind. Um, but I've seen this in my life. To think about what the reversal would look like, I don't see it. Like, I just can't see those jobs coming back into that market and those people going and taking those jobs and it being economically feasible or cash flow viable for anyone anymore. Maybe I'm jaded because I grew up through the downside of it, but it's hard.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions there. Will the jobs be able to pay enough for people to have a living wage to support a family, right? In 2025, uh, if you're manufacturing goods here in America, as opposed to, where they're currently mostly, China, Vietnam, different places, uh, it's going to cost more to buy those goods, and so, can the economy support, consumers paying more for those items? Um, like, it's a lot more complicated than just imposing a tariff and then building a factory.
It is.
Uh,
I can remember like one of my best friends in high school's dad, after he got laid off from the steel factory. He was actually, I think he was at like 27 years, and it was like 30 years to fully vest, but he got a huge buyout from it, so he wasn't upset about it. Plus, he had bought real estate all along the way and had like 23, 27 houses.
Mm.
when this all happened. But he told me, he's like, yeah, man, we go to work, we make six figures, and we sleep. He's like, I go in, I find a place at my desk, I put my feet up and close my eyes for 8, 10 hours, and I make $100,000 a year. He's like, I understand why all of these jobs are disappearing because that's all any of us do. And it's a combination of, and this is not a conversation about unions, but the unions drove up the salaries of all of those executives, middle managers, and the workforce was just so diluted from a productive standpoint. And this is not a review of the macro environment of all of American manufacturing in the 80s and 90s. This is a microcosm of this specific person at that specific factory. But I have to believe it was more widespread. So, right, if you can go into another country and cut costs by 75% and with actually productive people, like, what are you supposed to do? You're not going to bring those jobs back and people get paid six figures to do nothing again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It comes down to, is the economy, meaning America, the American people, are they willing to make the sacrifices that would be necessary over a long period of time to
American
rebuild
people and sacrifices?
that?
What?
And then the second part of that question is, if even if we did it, does that make the most sense for the economy? Considering the other, what's the opportunity cost? What are the other industry sectors that we could be developing? Um,
Yeah, we have to be a leader in high tech or else we're screwed. I do understand, especially coming from a blue collar background, coming from a military background, like not having the base of industrial manufacturing in the country so that if we were to go to war, we had all of the minerals, resources, and capabilities to go to a wartime production
mhm.
economy is scary, right? If the U.S. economy hadn't been able to produce what it produced during World War II, not only would have Europe been lost, but like there's no telling what would have happened even here in North America, right? It was our equipment that won. It was our men. It was our women. It was our equipment that won that war. And if you had a large scale war again, I don't know that there's like any single like economy that has it all other than China, right?
Mhm.
They have stockpiles of all of the minerals. They have a billion people that don't have to be paid a living wage, right? Russia does not have the economic power to do that, although they haven't many times in history and they've forced their people to do it anyways. But like the self-sacrificing nature that would be needed and the material output, I'd like to think that we would rise to the moment, but we would be behind the eight ball right out of the gate, which is scary.
We would.
Maybe we'll win it on technology. So,
The world is also, countries are much more interdependent now than they were in the 1940s. And
well, they
so
are, but then we're sort of going back into an isolationist style of thinking. At least we were for like 3 months.
politically,
Politically,
but economically, what I'm saying is, like, China owns trillions of U.S. treasuries, right? And
did you see
so,
Warren Buffett now owns 5% of all of the U.S. Treasury market? I forgot to send that article to you. It made me laugh because we were talking about like that $330 billion in cash, right? The Treasury market's 4%. It's dependable. It's predictable. Just think about how
yep,
much cash that's throwing off each month.
it's all sitting in T-bills.
Each month he could buy 90% of the S&P 500, one company at a time. He could just buy one a month just off cash flow. I have not
Mhm.
actually looked at those numbers, but hold on. I got to calculate this real quick. So if we've got, I'm gonna have to turn my calculator
Yep.
sideways to be able to do
Mhm.
these numbers. One, two, three. One, two, three. One, two. Oops. Yep. Sideways.
Well, that's why, talking about Berkshire Hathaway, like they're sitting on that huge stockpile of cash. Um,
It's
they're putting all that money,
$1.65 billion a month at 5-ish% for 4-ish
right?
percent. Um, what is the
Right
value?
now, the 10 year is sitting at, what is the 10 year at? The 10 year is at 4.5. 2 years at 3.96. There's even a 13 week at 4.3, like Um, it's a no-brainer in a lot of respects. You know,
100 by 1.5 trillion. You know what's crazy? If I'm doing my math right, what is the average value of the individual companies in the bottom one? That's not giving me an exact number. $1.5 trillion divided by, let's see here. 1.5.
couple zeros in that.
There's a lot going on here. Is divided by 100. No, I guess the average value is 15 billion.
15?
Yeah, so I guess he could buy one of them a year just off of cash flow. Not compounding either.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's an awesome thing. It also speaks to the major challenge that Berkshire Hathaway has ahead of them of where do they put all this money to work?
But it is working. It is being put to work.
Yeah, it's in T-bills, but if you look at the historical performance of Berkshire Hathaway at like, thousands of percent, I think that they said that there was an article on CNN the other day that over his career since founding
I saw that.
Berkshire, so Warren has delivered a 5 million% return to investors in Berkshire Hathaway. So that kind
93 years, take me back to when I was 20 and not go out and spend all my money every night going out and partying. Right, that compounding nature would probably be pretty substantial.
Right, and so put all that cash to work.
Short on time, but there's a good segue in that.
Yes,
the MAGA what? The new.
Okay. So we're going to talk about the tax bill. There is a new tax bill that is currently in negotiation in Congress. Mainly looking at how to, I guess, extend some of the tax cuts from the first Trump administration in 2017. And one of the provisions in that tax bill that I think is particularly interesting, there's a number of different tax cuts around SALT and extending tax cuts on high income earners and all sorts of things. But one provision that's particularly interesting is the creation of a new it's not tax deferred, tax exempt investment account called a MAGA account, which you can it's going to be an account that parents can open up for their children. It's tax exempt, and as the way that it's currently written in the bill is, you'll be able to contribute up to $5,000 per year for each of your children into one of these MAGA accounts. That will be an investment account that presumably you can invest into, similarly to an IRA, I guess. And when your child turns 18, they can access those funds to either purchase a home, start a business, or pay for education expenses. The way that the bill is currently written, it's not passed yet, but that's the way that it's currently written. That's something that, obviously it doesn't exist. We have 529s right now. We have custodial IRAs, but this is something that has a lot more versatility in terms of how you can use the funds. It's a $5,000 contribution limit, which is not nothing.
I just ran the numbers. So if you put $5,000 a year away for your kids in this account, like when they're born through 18, you'll invest $90,000. And at an 8% annualized return, which is actually kind of low if you were comparing it to the S&P, it's still $213,000.
When they turn 18.
When they turn 18, they've got let's just go 10%, right? It's a $250,000. It's 268,000 to 10%. That's actually huge, right? We talked about one of the things we love putting money in our IRAs in the kids' IRAs. But they can't touch it and they can't really do anything. Yes, they'll be millionaires when they're 65, but when they're fucking 18, right? There's expenses associated with that. Right. The 529 doesn't cover, that a brokerage creates so much tax burden on.
Yep.
I love it.
Yeah. Because 529 account, it is just for education. As far as I know, like you can only use that for education. An IRA, I believe that there's a rule that you can take up to $10,000 out of the IRA to purchase a home. If you're familiar with that, Roger, but it's $10,000.
Yep.
This compounded over 18 years, $250,000 that could go towards a home, a business, or college. That's a down payment on a house right there.
Well, depending on what part of the country you live in, that's a house.
It could be a house. That's right, and it can be an entire 4-year degree. Depending on where you go to school, it could be a 4-year degree and a master's
It could
degree.
be.
Or obviously it also could be startup capital, I guess, for starting a business. I don't know exactly how they're going to write that provision, but
Well, knowing Trump, they're going to leave it very vague, so no one actually knows, right? It's going to be a paragraph. It's going to be the whole bill. There's good and bad with that, though.
yep. But it is something that would be really interesting for parents to give them a much more flexible vehicle than an IRA and a 529 and a contribution limit that's pretty high.
Yeah, no, that is
It's
it's a
almost as
decent
much as an IRA.
contribution limit. I feel like every little bit helps, and there's always been a missing instrument to planning for your child's future because of that in between time where it's hard to
Yep.
find an account type that you can put cash into for those specific, like starting a business, buying a house. Those are two big ones. We do it right now through a brokerage account because it's got the greatest liquidity, but the tax burden on that can be pretty substantial depending upon how
Yep.
you deploy it.
Yep. And it's not clear if the $5,000 contribution is pre or post tax, but it seems, but with
I'm
the
going to
growth,
assume it's post-tax.
yeah, I would assume it's similar to a Roth. But the withdrawal afterwards, the appreciation is all tax exempt. So
Still worth it.
it's tough doing a Roth for your kids, especially if you're not self-employed. Like there are hoops that you have to jump through in terms of like generating income because it has to be a contribution that comes from income. So this would be a much simpler way to be able to put away, up to I guess a little over $400 per month.
Yep. Nope. I like it. Any final thoughts for today? We went a little over on time, but
I have nothing to add.
I don't either. I think that I appreciate you sending me the information on the MAGA accounts. I'm kind of looking forward to having the opportunity to put those into the early system.
We'll see if the bill passes. So the bill is in the House right now, and that provision made it into the final version of the House's bill, but it still has to go to the Senate. So
It'll go through.
see,
All
we'll
right.
see.
Thank everyone for joining us. Next week, we'll talk about something. I have no effing idea what it's going to be, but I'm sure it'll be great. So we'll see you next week. Thank you.
All right.